Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me. I am Heather with Rose Hill Paper Cottage, and today I am sharing how I am creating journal covers from the quilt kits that I had put together. So if you happen to have those, these pieces will look very familiar. If you don't, you can just grab whatever quilt pieces that you have and follow along. So I have a couple of them here, and these were just offcuts, like just kind of, one was really small, one's, you'll see when I fold it out. They weren't the larger pieces that I sent. And these also have kind of like where it's been laundered. And so the stuffing inside, or the batting, I should say, has bunched up in some spots. So a way to take that out but preserve that hand stitching, I'm just kind of making some cuts in the back of it. It's a little bit difficult for me. I would just say to like use scissors and stuff, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with my hand, and so I am just kind of making do. It's actually quite easy just to take the seam ripper, start a little hole, and then you can just take the scissors, and just kind of like slice it. And you don't have to do that, though. Actually, you don't have to remove the batting. It just is really kind of built up and just really kind of chunky where the binding is going to go. And so I think that might cause me issues a little bit later when I go to assemble. So you'll see, I just am, kind of going by feel, just taking out some of the extra batting as, as I need to. So you can see I'm just kind of like feeling around of where it bunched up. It's kind of funny how quilts will sometimes do that, where they bunch up in some spots because, it's been hand quilted, and so you would think that it wouldn't do that so bad, but, it really did. The hand quilting is like close together, so you would think that it would have really stayed positioned well. But, I don't think you would notice it unless you're making like a small project like this, like a journal where you've got to fold it. It wouldn't have been anything that was noticeable just, laying on a bed. So this little part here actually had some extra, like, I was like, what is that? I had to actually cut it out. It was, like, I don't know, maybe a piece of material or something that was actually in between the cloth, because basically it is this quilt back, then there is the batting, then there is like a thinner, material, some sort of, like linen or something like that, and then the front of the quilt, and that had like another piece of material like sandwiched in there. So that was kind of strange, but who knows? I'm trying to remember like what part of the quilt, like what it looked like in the beginning, before I cut on it. I kind of can't remember like the design or how it went or what was the border on the edge. Not that any of that matters, but I was just trying to think of like, was that like an edge piece maybe? So a seam ripper is really great. It's your friend. It really is. You can stab yourself too, so be careful. But it helps to kind of like break up, the batting a bit so that it's easier to pull off. And again, I am just kind of, I don't really like the batting like sticking out. And since these are all going to have, I think, rough edges, well, I know they're going to have rough edges. I'm going to go with that kind of like pretty shabby look. I just don't like all that batting, on the edge, sticking out. A little bit's okay, but I don't want, this, where it's been cut and then it's, this just chunk of like batting. I'm sure you understand what I mean, right? Well, just look at your quilt piece and then you'll kind of understand. So I don't mess with it too much where it's really thin, but where it's really bulky, I really, pull that out. And I mean, at this point, I'm just prepping the covers. I'm prepping them for what I think they'll end up being. I don't actually know. It's going to be a project that evolves. I don't have it planned out. So I felt here it was really thick. So I did remove a little bit of that hand stitching that was just on the end so I could just kind of free that up. But you can see the layers in there, which I always find interesting. I always think, they use like an old blanket or something, and I always think that's kind of like a cute little find, or, they've layered it with somebody's old clothing. I think it's cute. So I'm just kind of thinning it out here. I'm not totally removing everything, just kind of spreading it back out a bit. So this really will help these journal covers not to be so lumpy and just have a nice squishy feel, but not like, oh wow, there's a bump here. So I'm just kind of contemplating, how to decorate them, how to make them look good. What do I think? What are my thoughts about it? And so this first one here, it has kind of like that army green kind of color, but it's just blank. There's no pattern. And so I feel like it kind of sticks out. And so I don't actually mind the color, but I just feel like it needs a little bit of, decoration. And now if it were square, it would have been really simple to just, throw something in it. But because it's a triangle shape, I just feel like lace could really kind of help it. So I'm just, I pulled out all my laces and I'm just kind of looking to see like what makes, what looks good to my eye. On the second one there, the one pattern is kind of throwing me off a little bit. It's got yellow in it and there's really no yellow on the rest of the pattern. And so I'm like, how can I dull that down? Lace is another good option for that. And kind of like when you get to like, laying things on top of other things and just kind of seeing, it just will click. You'll just be like, oh, that looks good. I like that. So I will ultimately choose, that lace behind. Now I'm contemplating whether I'll cover up a little bit on the front. But I feel like those two clash together. So I won't actually go with that. But that just gives you ideas. You can always cover up a color that, doesn't match, with your overall aesthetic. If there's, purple on it or, a lime green or, just some kind of pattern and it just is throwing off your whole entire design, you can do that. So this part on the front, is damaged. I showed in my other video when I talked about these that, there's like a little bit of a hole there. There's some hand stitching that's happened. And so I need to remedy that or decide what I want to do. And, the imperfections are charming, I think. I think that, it gives them character, kind of like an old house where it's got, just kind of the nooks and crannies and the arched doorways and, like hidden surprises and built-ins and, it just gives that character. So I've moved on to this piece here, and immediately when I put that down, I really loved how it already kind of had the lines in it, like the quilt. And it just hit me that one is the piece I'm going to use. I think it's really, really cute. So I'm just going through my scraps to see if I have anything, big enough. Just trying out all the different things. Nothing has really just said, pick me, which is kind of what I look for. And I'm also looking for a scrap that's big enough to cover the spot. Now, I could stitch some scraps together, but because all the other, stripes are wonky stripes, are all, solid pieces, I kind of feel like that might throw it off a little bit. So I find this like little pink, what do they call that? Like, I can't remember what they call that. It's like not puckered. It's like puckered. Seersucker. I think that's seersucker fabric. Puckered, seersucker, same thing. But I feel like that might be long enough. I ultimately won't use it, but you don't know until you like lay it down and kind of see it. If you're a visual person like me, I really have to kind of see it. I almost felt like it was going to be like too perfect. And I really wanted it to be more wonky, I guess. And that would have been harder to achieve with, that nicer, newer, like fabric piece. So I'll ultimately go with that polka dotted sari. So this here, I've decided I'm just going to make it into a pocket, and so it's going to be really, really thick, because it's such a heavy duty quilt. So as you can see here, I am using just some really, tiny snips, which is what I should have used in the beginning when I started. And I'm just tearing out all that batting, but I want to preserve the hand stitching, which is kind of funny because then I end up covering that all up and I'll have to hand stitch it again. So in retrospect, I could have just like tore off that whole back section, but really this is easier to do, to be honest. Just cutting through the back layer and then pulling out the batting if you don't want it. So now I'm just going to cut this, lace. And I always cut it a little bit larger than the piece, than the section that I'm actually going to stitch on. Because that just helps as you're sewing it along. And then you can trim, around the lace afterwards. Or material. I mean, you don't have to use lace. I could have actually completely covered up this particular pattern with something completely different. So I'm going to use a little bit of Fabra Tack or Fix or whatever I've got there. I'm going to use a little bit of that and just lightly. I'm not globbing it on or anything like that. Just very, very lightly, just to kind of let that fabric lay back down, where I had cut it open. And then I'll eventually back it with another fabric later, because it's going to be a pocket and I don't want anything to catch on the edges. Had I not cut back there, I wouldn't have needed to do this particular step of, covering it with fabric, because nothing would have caught on anything. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. You'll see as we go through the whole entire process, everything's in stages, doing certain things in order and just kind of figuring my way of what I want to do. So I decide I'm not going to be able to make that fabric kind of wonky enough, but I will be able to do it with this polka dot sari. So I just cut them, and I don't iron them or anything like that. I want them to have that, wavy, wrinkly look. And then I'll cut this piece. So again, I'll cut it a little bit larger than what I actually need, because I can always trim a little bit later. So now I'm showing you how I've stitched it. So I just stitched this triangle on 2 sides. And there you can see that's all I've done is just, ran it through the machine with a straight stitch to adhere it. Now you could hand stitch this all down, and I will do some hand stitching to kind of attach it in some more spots. But it's totally up to you, whatever you want to do. And then I did the same thing here. I stitched it on 2 sides because eventually in the end, the edges will all be sewn. So I don't try to do more than what I necessarily need to do, because I don't want to have to tear things out if I don't end up liking them. And then same with the polka dot sari. I just took them, I kind of flatten them out and then I stitch them. I don't try to be perfect. I just, get a nice, stitch and just go as straight as possible, down it. But again, this is very forgiving. It doesn't need to be perfect at all. So you'll see that there's a little bit of the material in between. And so I'll take you through how I do this third piece. So I just kind of flatten it as much as I can. And I don't worry about, the presser foot being in the middle. I just, whatever works, and I just kind of go with it. I don't even worry too much about, I just want to be on the sari and get it stitched down, kind of relatively as straight as possible and somewhere in the middle. I'll actually end up sewing like a 4th piece on over the very first one that I had sewn, because there was like a little mark on it and it just kind of bothered me. I couldn't get the mark out, so I thought, I was going to add that other piece. Now you can still see that like hand stitching, and I just think it's charming. I really like that it's there, and that you can still, see all that. So for this one, I'm actually going to, and I hope it's not confusing that I'm kind of like going back and forth, because I'm working on both of them simultaneously, but hopefully you can kind of follow along and figure that out. This is how I work. I constantly jump from project to project, so I hope it's not, like too confusing. But basically what I'm going to do here is, so that lace is more secure because it's such a large piece, I'm going to kind of mimic this, and not too closely, but mimic this hand stitching. Again, this hand stitching, it's not perfect. I've seen more perfect hand stitching. So I'm not trying to be perfect whatsoever. I'm not trying, and there's no rules here. I mean, you can do it however you want to. Again, the lace is going to be very forgiving, because I think I'm actually using embroidery thread, and it is the same color as the lace. So you're not actually going to see it, except if, you look up really, really super close. But I want the stitches to be uneven, just like the original person who created it. So you see how I do like a whole bunch? I just run that needle all the way through and then just pull it. instead of, going through each hole individually. And that's what's so good anyway about, junk journals in general. They're not meant to be perfect. They're junk journals. So you're repurposing and reusing, stuff that's already around. So because I didn't have enough thread here to just, do like a normal like knot, I just, clipped it, and then I'm just going to take the two pieces together. Because I actually double threaded, used 2 layers of thread as opposed to 1, because, it just looked better to me. So I'm really struggling with my finger there. So I'm just doing the best I can. I probably should have cut a longer piece, but, that's sometimes you don't know how much thread you'll need. So yeah, you can't even see my hand stitching. That's how good it is. No, I'm kidding. It's because it blends in. So I think that's really cute, like how all that turned out. I really love, I just love those details I added. I didn't really, change the quilt all that much. I just added some details in, and I just think it just added a little bit more charm. So here again, because it's like a larger section, and this, it might, kind of, get caught on things or whatever, because, it's got more kind of like holy space in it. I'm just basically tacking it in. So you'll see some like close up of me showing you how I'm doing it. So I'm just doing some hidden stitching. So you're not even going to see any of the stitching. But when I run my needle back through the quilt, I'm running it through the layers. I'm not running it behind, completely all the way through the quilt. I'm just running it through the layers and then just tacking this in places. So you see how I kind of catch a little bit of that. And then I just kind of go back through, and, about every, quarter inch or so, I'm just kind of tacking in some different areas. So I'm trying really hard to show you there where I just catch a little bit of it. So almost like, like a blind stitch is really, what I'm doing. And I'm showing I don't go all the way through to the back. I'm just in between the layers. So I wanted to show this in real time so you could kind of see. You can see I'm having trouble pulling that needle through with my hand. So I just, I just push the needle in. But be careful doing that too, because you could stab yourself. I would absolutely not know from experience. So there's like a loose, thread here. And so I'm just going to trap it in. That was, I don't know how old this piece is. I don't know if it's considered like crochet or like tatting. I'm not really sure what this is, but it's a very pretty piece. And I kind of went off screen a little bit. It's very hard to like see what I'm doing and to make sure that, to look at the camera to see, what you're seeing. So, but you get the gist. I'm just tacking it down. There's no rhyme or reason. Again, there's no rules. You just do whatever you think, works for your piece. Obviously, you're going to have something completely different, and you may not even need to do this. I did hand stitching on the other piece of lace. So, but this is, I'm doing hand stitching, but I'm not showing my stitches like I'm quilting it like I did with the lace. So now I'm going to finish this off with a knot in the back. I think that's really charming. So I'm not sure if I'll, tack anymore or glue any of the rest of this down. I don't know. We'll just see. I may just kind of like leave it natural. So when I had flipped this over, and I'll show you right here, it's, like I said, it's just kind of a wonky piece. And I feel like the back is a little bit short. So I'm just going to add a section on here. And so this green, piece here was in some of the kits. And I'm just going to add that, like a band, basically, on the back. And so then that allows me to have room for the spine part, and then it won't be such a skinny journal. So to do that, I wanted to cut out the little bit of, they used like a blanket or some type of, I don't know. I don't know all the words for quilting. I should, but I don't. And I have before. But anyway, it's whatever they had used for the batting in there. I just trimmed it, so that it's not wonky there where I'm stitching it. So to give me like, a quarter of an inch, basically, to where I meet it with the other quilt, and then it'll lay more flat. I hope that makes sense. So I've just used a little bit of glue to just kind of adhere it a little bit. Just so when I'm sewing it, I don't get, it's easy like when you're sewing, especially bulky items where things kind of shift a bit. And so that glue kind of helps a little bit. So here you see here, and you may have to raise and lower your presser foot, while you're going through it, because as it feeds through, it can kind of stretch it, oddly. And so you want it to have a nice, you want it to lay as flat as possible. You want it to look like it's part of the quilt, that originally was created. Even though I'm leaving my edges all rough on the top, but that's just the look I'm going for. Like I said, that pretty shabby look. So the next thing I want to add is that other piece of trim, but I decided to do a second stitch, and I'm just going really wonky. I'm not making it straight or anything. I'm just kind of like going all over the place. Now you could do your stitches like with a zigzag stitch. My machine doesn't always work with the zigzag. Sometimes it doesn't do that stitch. My machine's really old, so I just tend to use a straight stitch a lot. And so now I'm going to add that piece. And what's cool about it is that's what I used on the front. So it kind of ties the whole piece together to make it more cohesive. But it would be fine if you added anything else on the back. But this is a way to tie in that new border addition that I've done, with the whole entire aesthetic of the whole piece. So I'm just adding little dabs of glue to just adhere it in place, and then I'm going to machine stitch it all. I don't think I hand stitch any of this one, because it's such a small little piece. So you'll see me do a straight stitch, and then I'm going to go around the curvy little border edge with the sewing machine. So there's my straight stitch across the piece. Now I could have continued on, and just went around the whole thing, but I really didn't want to do it like that. I wanted it to be broken. Sometimes when if I would have stitched that whole entire shape, it would be more pronounced than kind of breaking up your threads and having, different starting and ending points within that design. So I'm just curving as much as possible around the little scalloped edges and just rotating my piece as I go. And I think it's really cute. It's almost like, it was already like that. So it turned out really, really good. So I think it's really super cute. I love it. So that just gives me more room for the spine area. So it'll still be a smaller, journal, but adding that extra, probably 2 inches was really helpful. So I'm going to talk about like the next steps and what I'm kind of doing. So I need to cover the back of it somehow with something. And so I have this lace, and then I have this green piece here, and I'm kind of toying around with the idea that it may kind of look like this, I don't know, but I'm just, I'll sit and think about it for a while. But that's kind of the direction that I'm going to go. And then for the second one, I picked this stripe ticking fabric, and then, because I like it, and then, I'm thinking about just using a little bit more of that green material to stitch around this pocket. So then that way, when things are slid in and out of it, it won't catch on that, quilted fabric where I cut it and remove the batting. So something that you need to think about when you are deciding on your inside is, are you going to add, like paper background or a paper pocket or fabric or whatever? I'm kind of leaning towards doing some paper backgrounds and then doing a pocket on front of that, but I'm not 100% sure. But I just go and I pull all the things that kind of match, that I think would work good, that I like the way that they look together. And so you'll see on this other one, I've kind of pulled, some other different scrapbook papers that do match if that's the route I go. I could, on either option, just stick with all fabric, and do fabric pockets inside. But the fabrics that I've chosen are a little on the boring side. So if I want to dress it up, I would need to do some sort of patchwork, which, it could totally change. So then I'm showing some other papers that I have already printed out. That's the other thing that I do is I look through, all of the papers and pull everything. Well, not everything, but a lot of things to kind of keep my color palette going and what I'm leaning towards. And so I printed out some papers. These are from the old design shop, and I'll try to link everybody below. But these are from the old design shop. I really love this kit. I think a lot of the colors could go. This doesn't mean I'm going to use them. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but this is what I'm leaning towards, is these papers here. I just think they're really, cute and charming. They add a lot of interest. This paper here is from Chapter 1 Papers. And then I have this paper here. I believe it's called Cotton and Twine or Cotton and Twig or, I don't know, but I'll put it below. That one is as well. And so was that one. And I just thought, I was just pulling some things and maybe I'll use them, maybe I won't, but I like to pull everything that I think I might use. And then these tags are from Ruby and Pearl. I just love, you can find every color. I love all these tags. They're fabulous. So I've printed those. So I may print other things, but anyway, this is where I've ended. And then I will see you, in the next video, and we'll see where we're at, what I've decided to do. So anyway, thank you guys, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.